Hi, I'm the Herb Guy, and welcome back to the Where Science Meets Nature podcast, a place where we explore the power of nature through the lens of science. Now, today we're going to talk about the dandelion plant, and I know that most people assume that a dandelion is just a weed. However, it is much more than just simply a weed. There is a lot more to it than that. First off, I'd like to hear your thoughts on what you think a dandelion is. I mean, when you hear the word dandelion or when you see a dandelion, what do you think? If you're somebody who follows me, you probably think it's some sort of medicinal plant. If you're the average person, you probably just assume that it's a weed. People pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars every single year to ensure that their yard is dandelion free. However, when you go to a fancy restaurant or if you go to a restaurant and order salad, if you look very closely in your salad, you will oftentimes find dandelion leaves right there in the salad. Now, to be fair, they're not even native to the United States. They actually come from Eurasia, and they were brought over here by the settlers because even back then, hundreds of years ago, they were very well aware that dandelions were not only medicinal, but they were an extremely valuable food source. And let's get into some of the details on what's so important or what's so valuable about the nutritional value of a dandelion. Now, this is the first time you've been listening to me. I know what you're probably thinking. You're probably thinking something along the lines of, "Come on, man, the nutritional value of a dandelion, it's just a weed." But I think you might be surprised. The leaf itself is super nutrient dense. In fact, it's probably more nutrient dense than any of the vegetables you would buy in a can, like spinach or kale. It has both alpha and beta carotene. Now, this is actually vitamin A, but alpha and beta carotene are the precursors. It has vitamin A itself, but it also has both of those. Now, they will metabolize differently in your body, so you'll get a cleaner or a purer form of vitamin A. But it doesn't just have vitamin A. It has B complex vitamins like thiamine, riboflavin, niacin. It has minerals as well, so you got your calcium, your iron, magnesium, manganese, phosphorus. It's loaded with all of those. It even has selenium. Now, it's pretty important to note, though, if you're going to be eating the leaves, that white sap that leaks out of the leaves is called lactocarium. Now, what lactocarium is it's kind of a rubber base. It's not necessarily rubber, but if you have a rubber allergy, you will have a similar reaction to the white sap that comes out of the dandelion. This is a very potent pain reliever. Lactocarium is. What it'll do is it'll bind to the pain receptors in your brain. It'll bind to the pain receptors in a specific location, and it'll help to relieve that pain. So if you do have one of those kind of allergies, this is probably a good plant for you to try to avoid, or at the very least, get very minimal amounts of, because it could definitely cause some problems. Now, that's only discussing the leaf. When it comes to the dandelion, the root is actually pretty edible as well. It has a lot of the same vitamins. It doesn't necessarily have the vitamins, so you're not going to have a lot of vitamin A, you're not going to have a lot of vitamin C or E, but you will have a lot more of the minerals. So calcium, iron, magnesium, all of those are going to be a little bit more potent and concentrated in the root. And my belief on that is most of the minerals are going to be coming from the ground anyway. And since the root is the direct access to those minerals, a lot of those will congregate in the root. Now, the cool thing about the roots are you can literally cook those the same way you would a carrot. They're going to have roughly the same consistency. Depending on where you're at, a dandelion plant can last about 10 years, give or take. As long as it's well fed and you know what I mean, well watered, it's maintained, it's not messed with a lot. It can last about 10 years. But you don't want to eat a 10-year-old dandelion root. You just don't. It's going to be tough and woody. So when it comes to the older roots like that, anything 3 years and older, maybe 4 years and older, would be something you would use as an extract, or you'd dry it out and grind it up and use it as a powder. But don't try to cook it. It's going to be like trying to cook wood. Now, 3 years and younger, those roots will actually get pretty big. If you can plant them the same way you would a carrot, it's going to get fairly similar to a carrot as long as you leave it alone and kind of let it do its thing. That root will get really deep, especially if you have really nutritious ground. Now you pick it out of the ground and then you would of course clean it like a carrot. Unlike a carrot, however, carrots you can't eat the greens, right? They're toxic. However, you can eat the greens on a dandelion, so the entire plant is edible. The entire plant is significantly more nutritious than the carrots will. Now, the other cool thing about dandelion is it has a compound inside of it. Deep inside, it's called inulin. Now, this compound, inulin, is going to be processed by your body the same way insulin would. So people with diabetes or people that are kind of borderline or kind of want to keep their blood sugar levels at a specific level, they can have the dandelion root, even in fact substitute their carrots for dandelion root in order to be able to get some of that inulin in there. Carrots will have a sugar, right? More of a vegetable-based sugar. They're very sweet. Dandelion, not so much. They're pretty bitter. I am not a huge fan of the flavor of dandelion root, but it is. I mean, don't get me wrong. I've eaten it. Like I've eaten lots of food in my life that I'm not necessarily a fan of. I've definitely eaten it, but 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 you got to put something on it. Salt, something. It's got to be something, because from my perspective, you just can't eat it raw, or you just can't eat it like a carrot unless you. It's an acquired taste, I guess. Now the flowers, you can eat those too. The flowers are edible. They have some of the vitamins. They're going to have a little bit more of the vitamins. They're going to be rich in iodine. But most people will take the flowers and they'll make what's called dandelion wine. And they'll get bunches of the flowers together. I've never tried dandelion wine. I've seen it a couple times. I've heard it's pretty tasty, and I've been kind of wondering whether or not I want to try it one of these days. We'll see. What do you guys think? Do you think I should try to do some dandelion wine and maybe do a video or two about it? Because if you think about it this way, that's technically going to be a fermented dandelion because you made it into a wine. So I think a lot of those properties and the vitamins that are going to be inherent in the greens are going to translate and be better metabolized by doing the dandelion wine. It's going to be more concentrated. It's going to get in there and it's going to get your gut flora replenished. It's going to help try to eliminate some of the bad gut flora or maybe some that's causing the issues. So, I mean, I'm not recommending anybody drink it, of course, but I can see where it could be really beneficial, even if you only did like like a tablespoon a day, just enough to add those probiotics to your gut. You're going to get it's going to be super nutrient dense. It's going to have all of those vitamins that I mentioned that the leaves had. Probably be a little richer in iodine, but for the most part, you could do that way to help supplement your diet. You can help that way to help supplement your gut. There's lots of different options and lots of different ways that we can incorporate dandelion plant itself into our diet. And it's pretty surprising. Most people don't realize that most of the plants that we have in our yard are not only edible, but a lot of them are nutritious. In fact, I often say that the dandelion is the most nutritious plant in your yard. And for the most part, it is easy to grow. If you try to get rid of it, you understand that. Or if you have a yard with a lot of dandelions, you understand that, yep, definitely grows pretty easily. It would just be an issue of trying to cultivate it at that point. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, if this is the first time you've ever listened to me, you might be thinking, wow, I never actually gave it any thought, the dandelion. I always thought it was a weed, because up until I was about 22 or so, 21, I thought all the plants other than the grass were weeds too, because I used to have to spend my time pulling weeds. And when I go and discovered this part of herbal medicine, I was like, wow, this is pretty incredible. Now that I've discussed the edible part of it or the nutritional part of it, I would like to go into the medicinal properties. Now, you have to understand something about herbal medicine. When it comes to specific herbs, each herb actually has many different types of medicinal properties. It's not just, dandelion is good for your kidneys, or dandelion is an antioxidant, or whatever. It actually has a ton of different properties. Every single herb does. So from my experience, I have gone through the list and I have looked and looked and looked and looked. I have yet to find a single herb that only has one medicinal property. I've only seen it. Maybe atropine, which comes out of, oh crap, what's it called? Oh, that's right, poison hemlock. Poison hemlock has a compound in it called atropine, which is known to counteract the effects of nerve agents. And there's a few other plants in the wild that have atropine that the pharmaceutical companies will actually get the atropine from these plants and then utilize them in a more pharmaceutical manner. And to be fair, almost anybody can actually has the ability to use dandelion in a medicinal manner. A lot of it has to do with the research. So when it comes to dandelion as a whole, it has a slew of medicinal properties. Now, one of the things that it's mostly touted for is its liver support. It's known for its ability to be able to help detoxify and rejuvenate liver function. Now, some of the studies that I've read say that it does help to boost liver function, but not as well as an herb like milk thistle seed, for example. Milk thistle seed actually has some pretty potent liver tonic properties. Um, Dandelion, there have been a few studies on it in regards to how it can benefit the liver. I have seen more studies to show how it can help with the bladder, help with the kidneys, help get that part of the system flushed out too. The liver and the kidneys, they're all part of the filtration system of the body anyway. So, even if it does help the liver, which, I mean it does, not a bad thing to take. It's easy to ingest, easy to use, easy to incorporate in the diet. And one of the other things that it's well known for is as a diuretic. So this can actually help to flush out excess fluids from your body. So, if somebody's a little bloated or if you've got a lot of water weight, this can help to eliminate a lot of that. And the beautiful thing about the way dandelion works is even though it's going to eliminate a lot of the water, it's not going to dehydrate you. It's not going to remove any of your nutrients, because the cool thing about dandelion is it leaves nutrients behind. So it will act like an electrolyte, and it'll leave nutrients and other types of benefits behind while simultaneously flushing out the extra water that your body just doesn't need. Also a pretty potent antioxidant. I'm not sure if you necessarily know what an antioxidant is, but you have various things like free radicals, which are, cosmic rays and UV rays and stuff that go through your body. You really can't stop them. You have other types of toxins and things, and these cause what I call body rust. They're oxidants, right? They get into your bloodstream and they kind of cause problems. They don't allow blood to flow as well. They'll cause blockages, things like that. So what dandelion is known to do is it will bind to these oxidant causing compounds, these oxidant causing things that are affecting your body. It will bind to them on a molecular level, and then when you do, when a diuretic action kicks in and you flush all that out, those toxins will go with it. You're not going to keep them in your body. It's going to help to bind to them. Now, what that will also do, it's kind of like a side effect, and they very much go together, would be as an anti-inflammatory. It's a pretty potent anti-inflammatory herb, so if you suffer from conditions like arthritis, or if you get swelling in your joints or swelling in various places, inflammation in your organs, this will help to reduce the inflammation that your body is experiencing. One of the most important things to note about the anti-inflammatory properties is if you look at the science, all chronic illness is caused by inflammation. So that's going to be heart disease, diabetes. Yes, diabetes is caused by inflammation, autoimmune disorders, kidney disorders, liver disorders. It's all, even cancer, right? They're all caused by inflammation. So you want to make sure that when you are changing your diet up, or if you're adding specific supplements to your diet, you want to make sure that they have some pretty potent anti-inflammatory properties. And believe it or not, the inflammation is going to tie in right into the next medicinal benefit of dandelion, and that's going to be as a digestive aid. The leaves, the flowers, the root, they all act as a pretty potent prebiotic, and what these are simple starches that makes it easier for your digestive system to break down, so the probiotics in your gut will be better able to digest them. So this will help to support your digestion. It helps to stimulate bile production. So in your gallbladder, it's going to help to stimulate more bile. It's going to help to also aid in the nutrient absorption in and of itself, because it's going to boost that function. And due to the insulin or the inulin that's in the dandelion, it's going to help you with your blood sugar regulation. It's going to help to stabilize your blood sugar levels. And this is like key for diabetes management, for prediabetes management, for people that are really trying to pay attention to that. Now, one of the cooler things about dandelion, and among herbalists, this is actually one of the more popular benefits that dandelion has, is it's a cardiotonic. This is a cardiovascular herb. It's a great heart herb. Now, how does it help your heart? Well, it can help to help your heart by helping to balance your cholesterol. Now, I hear a lot of people talking about lowering your cholesterol, lowering your cholesterol. I think it's a much better option to balance out your cholesterol. So what the dandelion will help do is it'll help to remove a lot of that plaque and the buildup that happens in your arteries and in your veins. and it also helps to regulate your blood pressure. I don't mean it'll just lower your blood pressure, or it'll only raise your blood pressure if you have low blood pressure, but it'll help to balance and regulate your blood pressure. Now, some of this could be due to the fact that it helps boost the digestion. Some of it could be due to the fact that it's so nutrient dense. We're not really sure why it works that way, but we definitely do know that it's a thing. Now, it's also a good immune booster. This is not an immunomodulator. This will not help to balance out your immune system. What it's going to do is it's actually going to boost it. It contains compounds that help to support immune function, so this is going to get some of your T cells, your killer cells, all those cells that attack foreign objects, so they're going to be helping to fight off a cold or flu. This is a straight immune booster. So if you have an autoimmune disease, this is probably not something you would want to take on a daily basis. Now, for the average person who doesn't have an autoimmune disorder, it really wouldn't be that big of a deal to have a cup of dandelion tea every day. And even if you do have an autoimmune disorder, it probably wouldn't necessarily be a bad idea as long as you have you have your proper diet and you got your digestion fixed. But again, that's going to be a case by case basis. Every single person is going to experience this a little bit differently. One of the other cool things about dandelion is that it has some pretty potent antimicrobial properties. It's shown to be pretty effective against bacteria, viruses, and fungi. Now, in regards to the bacteria, in the studies that they did, the two that were the most common was they did E. coli and they did Staphylococcus or staph, and they found that the compounds in the dandelion was pretty potent against the bacteria. And then they found that it helps with specific viruses, especially that virus. There was a study done, I think, in like 2021, maybe 2022, where they used dandelion specifically for that, and they found that it had a pretty detrimental effect for that particular virus. So, I mean, there's a big shout out for dandelion just in that particular case. Now, they also tested it against candida or fungi, and they found that people that have jock itch or athlete's foot, they did have some benefits when incorporating the dandelion extract and incorporating the food itself into their diet. So now that you've heard all that, I want you to take a second to reflect on this plant. Maybe if you'd never heard of dandelion medicinally before, 17 minutes ago or whatever, you thought it was just a weed. And now that you've heard all that, does it change your perspective on dandelion at all? Does it change your perspective on the other plants that you walk on, step over, pull out of your flower beds or whatever? It should. I mean, that's kind of my main goal of why I do this, is I would like to be able to have people have a different perspective of the world around them, right? There's different things that most people overlook, and this is one of them. And ever since I've been very, very young, so again, for the last 30 years or so, I've always looked at plants a little bit differently than I ordinarily would have. And to be fair, just recently I've found that there are some plants that you would never expect that have medicinal properties. And if sounds like something that would be interesting to you, how about the medicinal properties of poison ivy? Okay, so I can't go off on a tangent because I know that if I change the subject, I will go off on some far out tangent, and I don't weave very well, so we may never get back on topic. So we're going to stay on topic. And we've talked about all the stuff that just eating it can do for you internally. Like it helps with your organs and inflammation and all that good stuff, right? And you're probably like, wow, that's pretty cool. But did you know that you can apply dandelion extracts externally, topically? It doesn't even have to be extracts. You can make it into a tea or a wash or a poultice, apply it directly, whatever. And it has direct impact on your body. It's incredibly healing. It helps to heal when you apply it externally. And we're going to get into that in here in just a minute, because I'd like to tell you a story about some pretty incredible external uses that most people would have never considered. And when I first read it, it's actually a science fair project. But when I first read it, I was like, what? No way. There's absolutely zero chance that some weed that I pull out of my yard could ever do something like that. So I read it, and then I'm going to tell you that story, and then I'm going to tell you what happened after he did his science fair project. So as the story goes, there was a young man named Jad Sakar, and in 2015, he entered a project into the California State Science Fair. And I'm just going to go ahead and read it because it's pretty amazing. It's not going to take long. It's less than a page. And the title of it is It's More Than a Weed, It's Sunscreen. The project number was J1923. You can actually look that up. You can download it. It's downloadable as a PDF. And I saved it because what I read was like, nah, there's absolutely zero chance. So you have his abstract. So what's this whole science project about? Well, his objective and goals. This project's objective was to find out if dandelion extract had superior UV protection properties when tested against SPF 50 or 15, 30, and 50 copper tone sunscreen. So he took some copper tone sunscreen, 3 different versions, 15, 30, and 50, and he also got some dandelion extract. Now I don't know whether he used the root, but I'm pretty sure most of the extracts that you find online are going to be dandelion root. You're very rarely going to find a dandelion leaf extract. Now, it could have also been a dandelion extract where they used the whole plant. It doesn't specifically say in his particular science fair or in his project. But what he did do was pretty was pretty interesting. So methods and materials for this experiment: UV sensitive paper, SPF 15, 30, and 50 sunscreens, dandelion extract, and Ziploc bags were used. 120 UV sensitive papers that start off blue and turn white according to how much UV radiation impacts the paper, were put into individual Ziploc bags. 0.6 ounces of the dandelion extract was smeared evenly on 30 papers, and the same was done with all the other sunscreens. These papers were then simultaneously taken out and exposed to sun for 15 minutes, and then soaked in water to stop the chemical reaction. Each paper was then marked a specific number, 0 through 5, 0 being the best, to mark the sunscreen's efficiency. Each sunscreen was then given an average from the sun scale, once again, 0 being the best. Now this is a direct quote. Now the results. SPF 15 had an average of 1.23, so not the best for sure. SPF 30 had 1.1, and SPF 50 had 0.93, whereas the dandelion extract had an average of 0.5. The hypothesis was that dandelion extract would be as effective as SPF 30 sunscreen, but the results showed that the extract was even more effective than the SPF 50 sunscreen. So if you look at the math on that, the SPF 50 had a 0.93 protection, okay? The dandelion extract had a 0.5, so that's a 0.43 difference in how well the dandelion protected over the SPF 50. If you had to, I mean, that's almost twice as much. If you had to give that a number, and I don't want to do the math, but if you wanted to give that a number, that would be close to like SPF 93 or something like that in regards to how it works. And then of course there's the whole sunscreen issue. I don't know if you've heard anything about the sunscreen issue, but there's been a lot of studies done that showed that sunscreen isn't necessarily as good for people as what they try to promote. And especially like the zinc-based or the metal-based sunscreens, where they say how well it protects against the UV rays. And what they're finding out is that those sunscreens actually don't help to prevent the UV rays. They actually cause more free radicals to go through the body. So imagine like if you're playing pool, if you ever play pool or billiards, and you go to break the ball or break the rack, when you hit the cue ball and it hits the rack, they all explode. Well, that's kind of what happens when you use sunscreen, and they're discovering this with the science. Now, this has been like the last 3 or 4 years that it kind of almost made the news for a second there, and then it kind of blurbed out. The dandelion, on the other hand, doesn't. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna read the next thing that happened. The conclusion discussion: tested dandelion extract proved to provide better protection against the sun UV rays than the commercial copper tone products having SPF 15, 30, and 50. That was his fair. I don't know how well he did on it, but if I were a judge, this would be number one. I mean, because that's pretty amazing. So apparently, I don't know for sure whether whether or not these guys actually did it or not, but apparently somebody else caught wind of this particular science fair. And if you look at it this way, it's like it's literally just a science fair, from a lot of people's perspective. It's like, what could you possibly get out of that? Well, apparently some other scientists, older scientists, ones with laboratories and better equipment than just using strips of paper and dandelion, they took it a little bit deeper, and what they found out was actually pretty miraculous. Now, I didn't talk about this particular medicinal property or medicinal benefit of dandelion because I kind of wanted this to be the surprise. I guess I probably should have put some sort of hook in there earlier to let you know this was coming up. But some other scientists went along, and I'm pretty sure that they used his science fair project as their basis for this. They didn't say it in the study anywhere that I read, but some other scientists came along and he did a much more comprehensive study on the different benefits of dandelion and how it affects the body on a molecular level. Now, if you weren't already blown away by the ability of a simple dandelion extract being able to protect you from sun's radiation, let me tell you what some scientists went and did. They decided to test that even further. Dandelion extracts protect human skin fibroblasts from UVB damage and cellular senescence. Uh, Sorry about that. Now, the abstract of that, what they wanted to do. Ultraviolet radiation causes damage in skin by generating excessive oxygen reaction species, ROS, and induction of matrix metalloproteinases, MMPs, leading to skin photoaging. Dandelion extracts have long been used for traditional Chinese medicine and Native American medicine to treat cancers, hepatitis, and digestive diseases. However, less is known on the effects of dandelion extracts in skin photoaging. Here, we found that dandelion leaf and flower extracts significantly protect UVB radiation inhibited cell viability when added before UVB irradiation or promptly after irradiation. Dandelion leaf and flower extracts inhibited UVB irradiation simulated MMP activity and ROS generation. Dandelion root extracts showed less action in protecting HDFs from UVB irradiation, induced MMP activity, ROS generation, and cell death. Furthermore, dandelion leaf and flower, but not root extracts, stimulated glutathione generation and glutathione reductase mRNA expression in the presence of absence of UVB radiation. We also found that dandelion leaf and flower extracts help absorb UVB irradiation. In addition, dandelion extracts significantly protected HDFs from H2O2 induced cellular senescence. So, the long and short of it was, in conclusion, dandelion extracts, especially leaf and flower extracts, are potent protective agents against UVB damage and H2O2 induced cellular senescence in HDFs by suppressing ROS generation and MMP activities and helping UVB absorption. Now, I'm not going to go into too many more details. If you want, let me know, and I'll find you a link to this study. I have the study right here. What it went on to do was it showed that different parts of the plant itself had a different reaction on the skin. So the leaf and the flowers were really good at helping to protect against the UVB damage, but they also help to replenish the skin cells. So even though, like when you've been in the sun a lot, you kind of have that photoaging effect. Well, the dandelion seems to help to slow that down. Those type of reactions that your skin has, the ROS, the MMPs, these things are what lead to that aging. And the dandelion, at least according to this study, was shown that on a molecular level, it helps to not only protect you from the radiation, but it'll help to heal the skin a little quicker. Now, the root did kind of the same thing, but it wasn't necessarily as good at the healing part of it as much as the protection part of it. So it's kind of interesting, that there are different aspects of the plant are going to react a little bit differently on the body itself, right? They're going to do it a little bit differently. Now, they did some other studies. Now, not this one in particular, but they did some other studies. Now, if you get a lot of sun exposure, what's one of the biggest concerns that people have with sun exposure? And that would be melanoma. Now, earlier I discussed the antimicrobial properties of dandelion, but I didn't necessarily touch on the anti-cancer properties of dandelion. And some other scientists had did some studies in regards to the root extract, and they tested it against melanoma. In the name of the study, it was the efficacy of dandelion root extract in inducing apoptosis in drug-resistant human melanoma cells. And in the description of the study, they kind of went on to say, notoriously chemo-resistant melanoma has become the most prevalent form of cancer for the 25 to 29 North American age demographic. Standard treatment after early detection involves surgical incision, and metastatic melanoma is refractory to immuno, radio, and most harmful chemotherapies, which means it doesn't do very well against those, or those don't do very well against that. Various natural compounds have shown efficacy in killing different cancers, albeit not always specifically. In this study, we showed that dandelion root extract specifically and effectively induces apoptosis in human melanoma cells without inducing toxicity in non-cancerous cells, which means that they applied it and they found that it had a very direct impact on the melanoma cells, right? It caused apoptosis. Now, if you're not familiar with what apoptosis is, another phrase for that would be structured cell death. And it's kind of, think of it as like a cancer side. You know, it's a poison that once it interacts with that particular cell, it kind of makes that cell just kind of die off, right? It's not able to replicate. It's not able to continue to further the mutate the normal cells, and they just kind of die off. And what they discovered with this is that it had that direct impact on that. Now, the problem with like chemotherapies and radiotherapies is they're pretty indiscriminate when they go after cancer cells, right? It kills everything in the area. And so when it comes to doing something like this, they want to make sure that the surrounding cells aren't going to be adversely affected. You don't want the cells that you're trying to protect to get harmed, right? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And which is why, you know, chemotherapy can be rough, radiotherapy, because, you know, the radiation in and of itself can cause further mutations, right? That's why they have to be very, you know, very focused when they give it. They try to keep it exactly where the cancer is so it doesn't go to other cells and cause further problems. So in this study, they found that the cells were not affected by the dandelion root. And from my perspective, if we listen to what happened with the last study, I would contend that the other two would actually help to heal the healthy cells, while, you know, the other compounds that are in the dandelion cause that poison to happen to the cancer cells. I mean, what do you think? Doesn't that make sense? I mean, from my perspective, if other studies have shown that it has the ability to make cells heal a little faster, then it makes more sense that if it's causing this structured cell death in a melanoma cell, that it's going to help to replenish the healthy cells, and it would give you a much better fighting chance for sure. I mean, those are just a couple of studies. I could have really bored you to death this whole time and read all the other studies where I referenced those medicinal properties, but I really wanted to do the California Science Fair, because, I mean, when I read that instantly like boosted dandelion up my list of favorite herbs to maybe number 5. I've got my list of favorite herbs, and the ones that I feel are the best. Milk thistle would be my number 1. Mistletoe would be my number 2. Hawthorn berry would be my number 3. I would probably go with, oh geez, what is my number 4? Yeah, maybe dandelion's my number 4. But that's a good foursome right there. That those 4 herbs right there could take care of a lot just in and of themselves. You got your kidney benefits, you've got your liver benefits, you got your anti-cancer benefits, and your immunomodulating benefits. Just a plethora of herbs. What I want to Would I want to take those in a blend? I don't know. Maybe, depending on what I would try to do. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Dandelion is very versatile. You can mix it with other herbs. So you can mix dandelion with milk thistle. In fact, I would prefer to mix herbs when I'm doing it myself, right? I don't really like to just use a single herb, especially if I'm trying to fix a particular issue, right? So some of the herbs that dandelion goes well with is burdock root. Dandelion root goes well with burdock root. Oftentimes they're roasted like a coffee. I don't like them roasted. I prefer them just dried, but some people prefer them roasted. The downside when you go to roast your herbs like that is you are going to burn out a lot of your compounds. When you roast them, it's typically anywhere from 250 to 300 degrees. They get really dark, like a coffee would. And the problem with that is a lot of the chemical compounds that you find in the dandelion are very fragile, right? On a chemical level, they're pretty fragile. So when you get your heat or your temperature up above 130, 135 degrees Fahrenheit, that's going to cause some problems with some of your compounds. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of like glycerin-based tinctures, because you have to heat up your water. There are some people that will just soak their herbs in the glycerin. Glycerin's not really good at necessarily absorbing a lot of compounds, so you have to make a really strong tea or decoction. So this is like a tea on steroids. and and then you put an equal amount of glycerin in, and then you would cook down to half the volume, and that would be, all your water would steam off, and or evaporate off, and all you would have left would be your glycerin, and there's your tincture. They can be, I don't know. There's a lot of people that just are so shy of the alcohol that they won't use an alcohol-based tincture, so they'll use a glycerin-based tincture. And that's another one of those where the heat can impact it. Same with tea. If you're making a tea, I always say never boil it. And in fact, we're going to go ahead and we're going to discuss some of the various ways that we can make a tea, or we can use the dandelion. We discussed the most common way, or the easiest way. That would be just to incorporate it into your diet, right? You're not necessarily going to get all the compounds because it's going to make it to your digestive system, but you'll get probably 90% of them. Um, the other way you could do it, if you don't want to do eating it, right, you can just make it into a tea. And how would you make it into a tea? Well, you would dry them out, whether it's the root or the flower, and you're going to use them a bit differently. So if you want a cup of just dandelion tea, you're going to use 1 teaspoon, 1 measuring teaspoon of dandelion leaf cut and sifted, dandelion root cut and sifted, per 8 ounces of hot water, or 250 milliliters. That's really not very much water, okay? Some of that's going to get absorbed into your plant, so you're not going to even end up with 8 ounces. You might get 7 3/4 or whatever, and that's fairly easy to drink, and that's going to get right into your digestive system. It's going to get right into your bladder. It's going to help with your urinary tract. It's overall will be pretty beneficial. When you go to make the tea, you want to keep your temperature as low as you can while still making it hot. So roughly 170 degrees. If you don't have a thermostat, just make it to where it's too hot to touch. It has a little bit of steam coming off, but do not let it boil. And you're going to want to get your water hot first, and then pour the hot water over the herbs, and then let them sit. If you're using the leaf, you're only going to want to let it sit maybe 3 or 5 minutes. You don't want to let it sit very long. It's going to get real soggy. If you have it in a tea ball or a tea bag, that'll be even easier. If you don't mind lumpy tea, I call it chunky tea. I don't do chunky tea, but I will if I have to. But if you don't mind chunky tea, that's even going to be even more beneficial, because a lot of those herbs in the cell membranes are going to get softened up by the water. Um, and with the root, you're going to want to do the same thing. You're going to heat up your water and everything, but you're going to let it sit probably 8 or 10 minutes. So try to keep your water warm if you can. Put a lid on it, so you want those compounds to stay in there, because dandelion, or all herbs, they have what are called volatile oils and essential oils. Even dandelion has essential oils. And these compounds, when you get a certain heat, if you get over 177 degrees, the majority of the compounds, like the essential oils and stuff, they're going to go away. They're just going to evaporate off. And unless you have some way to trap them, you're just going to lose that. So just keep your water at about 170 degrees. That way you're kind of ensuring that it's not going to evaporate, and you're still going to be able to drink it. Now, one of the other ways you can do it is you can make capsules. The most common form or the most common size of capsules would be like the size 0. They're not very big. Most capsules are sold in the size 0 form. If you take capsules easy, I usually take a handful at a time when I take capsules, so it doesn't really bother me. But some other people have some real issues taking capsules. So you can make your capsules. You would use a size 0 capsule, and that's gonna two of those capsules of a size 0 is gonna be pretty close to about a half an ounce, or half an ounce, excuse me, half a teaspoon. And if you're dealing with powders, if you're making a tea and you have a powder, you want a half what you would use. So if you have a full teaspoon of dandelion leaf cut and sifted, you're gonna go half a teaspoon of dandelion powder, because you have more volume in the powder. It gets more surface area. So you're going to use half a teaspoon. So 2 capsules is going to be equivalent to a half a teaspoon, pretty close, which would be roughly equivalent to having a cup of dandelion tea. Now you're going to get a lot of these same properties, only you're not going to get the extra water. So if you're using it as a diuretic, if you're using it to try to get rid of excess fluids, probably not a good idea to use it as a tea. You're just going to end up peeing more. So, use it as a capsule or even an extract, which we're going to talk about next. Use them that way, and they're going to be more effective for trying to get rid of the excess fluids in your body. So when it comes to extracts, we just talked about that. The easiest way to make an extract is with alcohol. Now, there's a lot of people that disagree, but dandelion doesn't have any compounds that are especially difficult to get out. So an 80 proof or 40% alcohol would be ideal for that. It's going to draw out all the properties. It's not going to be too strong when you go dose it out. And the general rule of thumb, if you're going to do that, is you're going to do 500 milliliters of the dandelion, whether you're using root or powder. At that point, you're using, well, I guess use a powder. Use 500 milliliters if you're using a powder. Oh my gosh, you're going to use 500 milliliters of alcohol, and then you're going to use 100 milliliters if you're using a powder, 200 milliliters if you're using cut and sifted. And that's going to be your ratio for making an extract, regardless of whether you're using the root or the leaf. It's going to be roughly equivalent. To be fair, if you really want to get more bang to your buck, kind of pack it down. Don't make it super tight, but kind of pack it down a little bit if it's the leaf, because it's kind of poofy. I call it a poofy herb when the leaves are like that. If you just kind of pack it down, don't pack it and make it like a nugget, but pack it down to make it a little firm, until you get that 150 milliliter, maybe 200 milliliter mark, and then add your 500 milliliters of alcohol. Now, honestly, that that leaf is going to absorb a ton of that alcohol, so you're going to have to really squeeze it out to get the most out of your properties, and you're going to leave it set in that alcohol for about 3 weeks, right? Let it sit there for about 3 weeks. Once it's done, strain it with the straining cloth or whatever you've used to strain it. Make sure you press it out really well. That way you're getting as many of those properties out as you possibly can, and you're not wasting any of your alcohol. Now, if you use that ratio, 500 milliliters of alcohol to 100 milliliters of powder, 200 milliliters of cut and sifted, you're going to dose it out a little bit differently. Your dosages on that is going to be 5 to 10 drops for an average adult. If you're talking about infants or younger children, dandelion's a very, very gentle herb. You're going to use 1, maybe 2 drops. Now, how are you going to give it to an infant? Well, you're going to put them in their bottle. If you don't bottle feed them, well, maybe put it in a teaspoon of water and just very, very gently on the side of the mouth. I don't know. However you would find a way, maybe a dropper. You don't need much. 1 drop, and then you can fill it up with water at that point. It's a baby. They're not going to be able to hold it under your tongue. For adults, 5 to 10 drops. And you're going to put it under your tongue and make sure it's kind of under your tongue and around your gums, because that's a very fast access point to your bloodstream. You're going to hold it under there, and I usually say until the sting goes away. If it doesn't hurt anymore, then the alcohol is clearly gone. You've got it where you want it, which is in your bloodstream. It's going to have it's going to go directly to your heart. It's going to get into the rest of your body. It's going to go to all parts of your body, rather than if you just drink it. It's going to take a while for some of those properties to get to where you want them, right? Because then it's got to go through your entire digestive system to get there. And though your digestive system does, ultimately go to all aspects of your body, it takes a while. If you do it underneath your tongue, it's shown to be more effective that way. If you'd rather use a glycerin, it's going to be the same thing. You're gonna, 5 to 10 drops. It's going to be much sweeter, but again, you're gonna lose a lot of the properties. So those are actually the ways that you can use the dandelion. It's really very simple. 90% of your herbs you're going to use this way anyway. Those are like the 3 or 4 basic ways. You can also ferment them, like with the flour. So I guess that's the fourth way. And if you're using it, if you're making the dandelion wine and you're using it medicinally, then you wouldn't need more than like a tablespoon. That would be a serving. That would be a quote unquote dose, because it's going to be pretty potent. And it's going to have a lot of the same properties that we mentioned with the leaf and the root. Actually, it's going to have almost all those same properties. I would say it probably has all the same properties. The leaf and the flower, as you saw, worked really well in regards to helping to heal the skin. So, it kind of stands to reason that the flowers would obviously have that same benefit. And, I mean, what do you think? Don't you think that logically, doesn't that make sense to you too? And to be fair, I could probably go on and on and on and on all day about this plant. There's a lot more things we can cover, but I don't really want to go any further with it. There's way too many other things we got to talk about. So let's talk about, what are we going to talk about on episode 4? Well, our patrons had voted and made Dandelion episode 3, and I gave them the option between dandelion and autoimmune disease. So Dandelion won. It was like 67% Dandelion, 33% uh, autoimmune disease. So episode 4, we're going to discuss autoimmune disease. Now I'm going to cover 4 or 5 different autoimmune disorders. So we're going to do like rheumatoid arthritis. We're going to cover fibromyalgia, multiple sclerosis. We're going to get into like 5 of the more popular ones. There's like 84 of them. I don't have time in a single podcast to go through all 84 of the autoimmune disorders, but I'm going to go through like 4 or 5 of them. We'll kind of cover them in a little bit of depth, how they affect the body. And then we're going to talk about different herbs. Now, that one's going to be very important. If you have an autoimmune disorder and you're wondering what kind of herbs you should be taking, I can't recommend what you should or shouldn't take. However, I can tell you what the science says in regards to herbs, and what herbs that people that have autoimmune diseases should probably avoid. The reason why is you have 2 different things, and I'll go into much more detail on this in my next episode. And it is, you have immunomodulators, and what they're going to do is they're going to balance your immune response. So people with autoimmune disorders, these kinds of herbs or plants are ideal, right? Because they're going to help to modulate your immune system and get it to quit trying to attack you so much. And then you have immune boosters, right? Those ones are off the charts. You really want to try to avoid immune boosters as much as possible, because what immune boosters do is just what the name implies. They boost immune function, and this can be counterintuitive, right? Your immune system's already working. It's working so well that it's trying to eliminate you. So the last thing you want to do is give it a boost to help it along. So we're going to talk about that next week too. We're going to talk about some different options that you can do, different things that you can do, and unfortunately, you're not going to be able to herb or plant your way to better health on that. In this particular instance, next week, we're also going to discuss some lifestyle changes you may end up having to make in order to find the goals that you really want to reach. I really want to tell everybody how much I appreciate you sticking around. Hopefully, things will improve and they'll get a little bit better. I don't have a lot of money to invest in better sound systems or anything, so this is the best I can do for right now. But it will get better, I promise. Just give me some time to build up some funds so I can afford to do it. I appreciate everybody who stuck around for this. If you did, leave a comment. Say, hey, I stayed till the end. That way I know that people are actually still listening. I appreciate everybody who followed or watched tonight. Feel free to follow me over on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. They're all easily accessible, and I try to post videos almost every day. Thanks for watching.